China has just delivered a financial blow that shook the world. 1.2 trillion USD, outside of SWIFT without the US dollar. This is no longer a warning. This is no longer a quiet experiment in a financial lab. On what seemed like a regular morning, Beijing officially launched a parallel monetary system to the US. A cross-border payment network based on the digital yuan, capable of handling global transactions without the US dollar or the SWIFT network. This isn't a mere technical upgrade. This is a global-scale financial revolution with one ultimate goal: to break the dominance of the US in the international monetary system. Over 1,400 financial institutions from 110 countries have quietly joined. Transactions have reached 250 billion USD in less than a year, and this is just the beginning. What will happen if the world transitions to using the digital yuan? Who will control global finance in the post-dollar era? Even Pi Network is positioning itself to become a cross-border consumer currency. Compared to the US dollar or China's digital yuan, it's still very small. But don't take your eyes off this video, because what you're about to see could redefine the future of global economic power. 1. China launches a financial system parallel to the US. While the world has been focused on trade wars and military exercises, China quietly activated a new international payment system, valued at 1.2 trillion yuan. No noise, no spectacle. This is a financial revolution. Beijing has silently prepared, and now it's officially in operation. At the heart of this system is the integration of the digital yuan and a cross-border interbank payment network. Together, they form a financial infrastructure that is not only faster, but also directly challenges the dominance of the US dollar and the SWIFT network, the US-controlled backbone of international transactions for decades. What's shocking is that this system enables countries, financial institutions, and businesses to invest, transact, and transfer money without using the US dollar or SWIFT. This isn't just a technical upgrade. It's a reshaping of the balance of power in global finance. A parallel financial universe is emerging, where the digital yuan becomes the main transaction currency, and China replaces the US as the central coordinator. As of Q1 2025, more than 1,400 financial institutions from 110 countries have joined this network. In under a year, the system has processed over 250 billion USD in transaction value. These figures show this is no longer a test project. It is a fully functioning global-scale entity, marking a major turning point in financial history. Why are so many countries joining so quickly? 3 main reasons. 1. Speed. Transactions are processed in seconds instead of days like with SWIFT. 2. Cost. Up to 98% cheaper by eliminating intermediaries and currency conversion fees. 3. Independence from US control. No political filters, no financial sanctions, and no oversight from Western regulatory bodies. This is especially attractive to countries under US sanctions or those looking to diversify financial risks. Nations across Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America have eagerly seized the opportunity, viewing this system as a path to escape Western-controlled financial structures. Even in parts of Europe, some financial institutions are quietly experimenting with this network, preparing for potential instability in relations with Washington. But it's not total freedom. The digital yuan is state-issued and runs on a centralized ledger, which means every transaction can be tracked, controlled, and programmed according to China's rules. This has raised concerns among Western experts that the new system, while offering freedom from the US, could introduce new risks of surveillance and control. Still, one thing is undeniable. China is rapidly building a global financial network independent of the US. If this momentum continues, the world could soon witness a bipolar financial system. On one side, USD plus SWIFT. On the other, digital yuan's China's new payment network. For the first time in decades, the US may no longer hold the upper hand, and this is only the beginning. As the world starts to recognize the hidden power of this financial system, China isn't just redefining the global payment infrastructure. They're transforming the very foundations of financial power. Can the digital yuan replace the US dollar and create a new financial order? And if you think this is just another Chinese experiment, stay tuned, because what's coming next will show you why the world is slowly moving out of Washington's control. 2. Breaking the dominance of the US dollar. China is implementing a long-term strategy to gradually dismantle the global dominance of the US dollar. This effort goes beyond just developing the digital yuan or an independent payment system outside of SWIFT. Beijing is also expanding its international financial network through bilateral currency swap agreements. As of early 2025, China has signed a total of 41 currency swap deals with various countries, totaling 580 billion USD in value. These agreements allow foreign central banks to access the yuan directly for trade and investment, without needing to convert into US dollars. This strategy isn't a one-off move. It's part of a well-planned campaign spanning over a decade, designed to undermine the dollar's status as the world's primary settlement currency. For years, Washington has used the dollar as a tool to extend influence, impose sanctions, and control global capital flows. But by establishing an alternative payment infrastructure, China is slowly neutralizing that power. These currency swaps are more than just monetary exchanges. They lay the foundation for a new financial ecosystem, where the yuan becomes the primary currency for bilateral trade. The results of this strategy are now clearer than ever. According to data from the People's Bank of China and international financial tracking organizations, around 38% of China's total global trade, worth trillions of dollars annually, is now settled in yuan. Critically, these transactions bypass SWIFT, the US-controlled system, and are instead processed through China's own payment channels, such as the Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, CIPS, or through direct currency swap pairs. This shift isn't just technical, it carries deep strategic significance. As more global trade avoids the dollar, Washington's ability to monitor, control, and punish other countries via financial sanctions diminishes. Nations currently under US sanctions, or those fearing geopolitical risks, are increasingly recognizing the value of diversifying their payment options. Rather than relying entirely on the dollar, they are turning to the yuan, a currency now backed by a full legal and technological infrastructure, ready to serve as a global alternative. Importantly, this trend is not limited to China's close allies. A wave of countries across Africa, Latin America, and even Europe are expanding their capacity to transact in yuan. In Kenya, government bonds can now be repaid in yuan. Argentina, grappling with debt and a dollar liquidity crisis, has used the digital yuan to settle part of its obligations to China. In the Middle East, oil and gas companies in the UAE have begun trialing yuan payments for exports to Asia, a move that would have seemed unthinkable just a few years ago. If this shift continues to expand, it could completely redraw the global financial map. The US dollar may not disappear, but it will go from being indispensable to optional. As more countries choose to settle transactions in yuan, the US's role as the global financial hub will erode significantly. And in the world of modern finance, losing that central position means losing strategic leverage that the US has wielded masterfully for decades. China isn't merely trying to replace the dollar, it is attempting to redefine the global monetary system altogether. But China's move isn't just about finance. This system also offers speed and cost advantages that most countries can't ignore. If the ECN digital yuan can handle transactions at 98% lower cost, what happens when more and more nations adopt it? Don't take your eyes off this video, because the next part will reveal why speed and cost efficiency are fueling a monetary revolution unlike anything we've ever seen. 3. ECNY surpasses in speed and cost in the race to reshape the global financial system. China is making a giant with its digital yuan, ECNY, not just as a technical upgrade, but as a tool that outperforms in speed, cost efficiency, and control over international capital flows. According to data from the People's Bank of China and the Bank for International Settlements, cross-border transactions via the ECNY system can save up to 98% in costs compared to traditional methods based on the SWIFT network, a Western-controlled standard for decades. The difference lies in the system's structure. While SWIFT relies on a web of intermediary banks, where funds pass through multiple institutions and layers of verification, ECNY is designed to operate directly without intermediaries. A typical international transaction through SWIFT can take 1 to 3 business days to complete, delayed by processes such as authentication, currency conversion, anti-money laundering checks, and sanctions monitoring. In contrast, with ECNY, the entire transaction can be completed in seconds. No transfer fees, no currency exchange required, and no Western procedural bottlenecks. If you were an investor, what would you choose? Speed and low cost, or absolute control? Type speed or freedom in the comments to share your choice. Perhaps the most significant aspect is ECNY's immunity to US surveillance. Under the SWIFT system, most international transactions pass through banks located in New York or London, where US financial agencies can monitor, intervene, or even freeze assets if sanctions are violated or if a party is blacklisted. This has made the US dollar a powerful weapon, allowing Washington to weaponize finance for political leverage. However, as more nations begin transacting with ECNY, they are choosing a path outside Washington's control, enabling trade, investment, and settlement without touching any US-controlled infrastructure. The cost efficiency of ECNY is also a key factor in its growing adoption. Traditional transactions involve multiple fees, intermediary bank charges, currency conversion, international processing fees, and sometimes even penalties for delays. In contrast, ECNY virtually eliminates these costs. All transactions are processed through digital infrastructure controlled by China's central bank, with the CIPS, Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, serving as the backbone. However, ECNY's directness and centralization also raise serious concerns over privacy and control. Unlike decentralized cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin or Ethereum, which operate anonymously and outside state control, ECNY runs on a centralized ledger. This means every transaction can be monitored, recorded, and even censored if deemed necessary by Chinese authorities. The government can set spending conditions, use smart contracts to program cash flows, and even reverse transactions without needing a court order or any oversight mechanism. Despite these concerns, for many nations seeking independence from US influence, the immediate benefits outweigh the long-term risks. Speed, savings, and the ability to conduct financial policy free from Western interference make ECNY a compelling option, especially in an era where financial sanctions are being widely used as a political tool. Countries like Russia, Iran, Venezuela, and even many in Africa and the Middle East are beginning to gravitate toward China's payment solution to mitigate risk and avoid being isolated from the global financial system. ECNY is not just a digital currency. It is becoming a symbol of a new financial order, where speed, low cost, and resistance to Western dominance form a strategic competitive advantage. And as more countries integrate ECNY into their payment ecosystems, the world may be approaching a profound transformation in how money flows and financial power is distributed. But this innovation comes with a critical question. Could China's control over the global financial system lead to a new model where currency becomes not only a tool for payment, but also a tool for behavior control on a global scale? Stay tuned. This story is far from over. 4. ASEAN and BRICS shift focus toward Beijing. While the West continues to struggle with trade wars and internal political instability, a massive financial realignment is quietly taking place across Asia and the BRICS nations. At the heart of this shift is China, whose digital yuan, ECNY, and broader digital financial strategy are steadily transforming the global trade landscape. One striking reality is that around 1/3 of trade between China and the rest of Asia is no longer settled in US dollars, a scenario that seemed unthinkable just a few years ago. In Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, digital payment systems based on ECNY are being increasingly implemented. In Indonesia, for instance, Chinese tourists and businesses can now pay directly in ECNY via QR codes, integrated with local financial apps like Mo. No intermediaries, no need to convert to US dollars, and no SWIFT network involved. This integration not only speeds up transactions, but also significantly lowers costs for both buyers and sellers. In Malaysia, a strategic partner in the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, a portion of the national payment system is now connected to China's CIP's cross-border interbank payment system. This allows large infrastructure projects, trade contracts, and capital disbursements to be conducted directly in digital yuan, bypassing the US dollar entirely. In countries like Pakistan and Kenya, pilot programs are being rolled out under the BRI framework. There, ECNY is not only used for payments between contractors, but also for paying workers' salaries and purchasing technical materials from China. And this movement isn't confined to Asia and Africa. Beijing's financial influence is spreading further thanks to the rapid expansion of BRICS, which has evolved from a political and economic alliance into a financial testing ground for central bank digital currencies, CBDC. In 2024, 3 Middle Eastern and North African countries, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates, officially joined the expanded BRICS Plus mechanism. Interestingly, their first move wasn't security cooperation or tech investment, but rather testing CBDC interoperability with China's ECNY. In the UAE, oil shipments to Asia have already begun to be settled using CBDC to CBDC mechanisms, that is, direct digital exchange between two central bank digital currencies without the US dollar as intermediary. Meanwhile, ACUS, African Continental Union States, is also discussing the use of digital currencies to fund infrastructure projects, modeled after the Belt and Road Initiative. If realized, these initiatives could create a completely new financial ecosystem, where digital yuan serves as the central unit of pricing, settlement, and capital flow. The reason these nations are turning away from the traditional Western financial system is not just about cost or technology. It stems from a deeper desire to escape the surveillance and political pressure tied to the US dollar. In a world increasingly fragmented by sanctions, tariffs, and financial barriers, China's dollar-independent payment model offers a compelling alternative, especially for countries facing economic uncertainty and instability. If this trend continues, the global financial balance may tilt further toward Beijing. Regions once considered America's economic backyard, like Southeast Asia and the Middle East, are gradually adopting financial tools built by China. The rise of ECNY doesn't just challenge the dominance of the US dollar, it raises fundamental questions about financial power in the digital age. In the near future, the world will witness not just a battle over technology or military power, but a digital currency war, where every transaction becomes a statement of sovereignty and strategic alignment. So what happens when ASEAN and BRICS nations not only choose the digital yuan, but begin to build an entire financial ecosystem centered around Beijing? Can the United States respond to this seismic shift in the global financial order? 5. The US imposes tariffs. China strikes back with Fintech. When President Donald Trump announced new tariffs of up to 60% on Chinese imports in early 2025, the global financial world was shaken. China's core exports, ranging from electronic components, steel, and pharmaceuticals to green technologies, were heavily targeted. The Trump administration's goal was to curb China's expansion in global supply chains and protect domestic manufacturing. However, instead of responding with traditional tit-for-tat tariff increases, Beijing chose a different path, a counterattack via financial technology. China did not launch a classic trade war, but instead used the opportunity to accelerate the adoption of the digital yuan, ECNY, across its export system. This was a strategic response, signaling that Beijing is changing the rules of the game. Not fighting tariffs with tariffs, but targeting the financial foundations long dominated by the United States. Rather than relying on SWIFT or using the US dollar for payments, China directed policy banks, commercial banks, and cross-border payment platforms to expand the use of ECNY in international trade transactions. What do you think of China's indirect strategy, fighting with fintech rather than tariffs? Could this be a smarter alternative to traditional trade wars? The results of this strategy became clear in the first quarter of 2025. According to data released by China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange, export settlement volumes using ECNY rose more than 19.3% year-on-year. More notably, 57% of new letters of credit, LCs, a vital financial instrument in global trade, were denominated and issued in ECNY instead of US dollars. This is a turning point in global trade finance. Letters of credit are seen as a measure of trust and currency legitimacy. That over half of China's LCs now use the digital yuan suggests that exporters and international partners are increasingly accepting ECNY as a trusted payment method. This not only helps China mitigate risks from USD exchange rate volatility, but also bypasses financial monitoring imposed by the US through the international banking system. China didn't stop there. It also introduced financial incentives to encourage ECNY adoption. Organizations like Sinosure, the state-backed export credit insurer, began offering special support packages for businesses accepting ECNY payments. Export loans in ECNY now enjoy interest rates 40 basis points lower than equivalent loans in US dollars, reducing financial costs and making ECNY a more attractive economic choice. This financialization of the trade conflict highlights China's strategic pivot. Beijing no longer seeks head-on confrontations. It aims to reshape the rules, from being a passive participant in a US-led financial system to building its own ecosystem, with ECNY at the core. China is slowly establishing an independent financial corridor where the digital yuan plays a central role without passing through the dollar. In Washington, this strategy poses a greater challenge than any direct tariff retaliation. As more international businesses turn to ECNY, the US dollar's dominance in global trade erodes, and with it, America's ability to impose financial sanctions, a long-standing tool of its foreign policy. In short, while the US threw an economic punch with tariffs, China answered with a subtler but deeper blow, using fintech to undermine the dollar's supremacy. This is no longer a mere tariff war. It's a contest for global financial control, where the victor must command not just production, but the infrastructure of payments in the digital age. With the ability to program financial behavior, the digital yuan may evolve beyond a payment tool into a powerful mechanism of control. And this, ultimately, may be the greatest threat to the current financial system. Will this level of control become a strategic weapon? Number 6, the threat of a programmable currency. One of the most striking and controversial features of China's digital currency, the ECNY, digital yuan, is not its transaction speed or low cost, but its ability to program financial behavior. Unlike cash or even decentralized cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Pi Network, ECNY is designed to be fully controllable by its issuer, in this case, the Chinese government. Each unit of ECNY can carry programmable code, allowing authorities to determine exactly who can use it, for what, where, and when. This means ECNY isn't just a means of payment, it becomes a tool for behavioral coordination. A transaction can be activated only if the recipient meets specific conditions, such as being within an approved geographic area, purchasing from an authorized list, or completing a government procedure. In certain scenarios, the system can even revoke or disable previously sent funds without court orders or legal processes, all done through a simple line of code. According to official documentation from the People's Bank of China, ECNY supports what's called controllable anonymity and conditional smart contracts. For instance, a government subsidy distributed via ECNY can be programmed to be used only for medicine, food, or healthcare services, and not for cash withdrawals or luxury spending. Domestically, this system is praised for enhancing fiscal transparency and preventing budget abuse. But when this system starts expanding globally, and more countries begin using ECNY due to lower costs or exclusion from Western financial systems, the political risks become more apparent. A major concern among Western analysts is that China could use ECNY as a tool of political influence over countries that become dependent on this infrastructure. Once an economy starts settling trade in ECNY, they're not just adopting a new currency, they're entering a digital infrastructure controlled by Beijing. This enables China to monitor economic activities in real time, knowing who is buying what, from where, and for how much. More critically, China could intervene at any moment. In a scenario of escalating geopolitical tension, this capability becomes a formidable lever. China could freeze payments, suspend disbursements, or even invalidate digital assets held by foreign companies or governments if they breach certain political conditions, stated or implied. Every payment could now be more than a simple economic act. It becomes a potential instrument of soft coercion, not through military or traditional sanctions, but through code. Would you accept using a currency that could be revoked with just a line of code? Comment yes or no to join the debate. This is why some nations, while welcoming alternatives to SWIFT and the US dollar, remain cautious with ECNY. After all, US financial sanctions, while powerful, are at least transparent and negotiable. ECNY, on the other hand, introduces the possibility of stealthy financial control, decentralized in structure, but hyper-centralized in power. If this trend continues to spread, the world may face a new financial model, not only post-dollar, but also post-freedom, where money is not just a medium of exchange, but a tool for behavioral control. At that point, the question won't just be, where is the money, but who controls it, and for what purpose? This is the core issue that makes the ECNY not just a technological advancement, but a global political challenge in the post-SWIFT era. With this level of financial technology, could China gradually become the world's financial center? And as countries seek independence from US influence, might this shift trigger a global financial crisis the US can no longer control? Number 7. Global strategic consequences in the event of a future financial crisis. Just like the financial crises of 1997 in Asia or 2008 in the US, what would happen if countries no longer turned to Washington for rescue? What if the role of the world's central bank was no longer held by the US Federal Reserve, but by Beijing through its digital yuan, ECNY? This is no longer a distant assumption. It is increasingly becoming a serious scenario considered by global policymakers. For decades, the US played a central role in providing emergency liquidity through mechanisms like dollar swap lines, IMF bailout packages, and coordination within the G7, which helped stabilize global markets during turmoil. Nations could rely on reserve flows from a US-led financial system. However, if the ECNY system becomes widely adopted, especially deeply integrated into developing economies, that role may gradually shift to China. Unlike traditional tools like conditional loans or multi-round negotiated bailouts, the ECNY framework allows capital disbursement or cash flow control with just a click. For example, in a liquidity crunch due to market volatility, China could instantly disperse funds in ECNY via its digital infrastructure. But such support would come with conditions, not stated in legal documents, but embedded in code. It might be usable only for imports from China, non-convertible to other currencies, or dispersed only if the recipient country complies with specific political requirements. This could fundamentally reshape the concept of national sovereignty in the 21st century. Instead of independently managing their budgets, nations may become bound to a digital system controlled by a foreign power. Rather than negotiating fiscal policy with international institutions, they must comply with code-based rules set by Beijing. From social welfare to defense spending to healthcare budgets, all could be remotely monitored, directed, and controlled through digital financial mechanisms. The issue isn't just who China might help in a crisis, but how it defines the conditions for that help. When money becomes a programmable tool, the one who gives it also controls how it's used, bringing with it an unprecedented level of political influence. A developing country might accept ECNY as a reserve currency simply for its low cost or trading convenience, but eventually find itself operating within a digitally controlled ecosystem, where every aspect of public spending is technologically monitored from outside. The biggest risk? The system's irreversibility. Once commercial contracts, financial transactions, and international payments are built on ECNY, it will be extremely difficult to return to the old system. The digital platforms, payment infrastructure, banking networks, and interconnected data create a closed financial loop, locking countries into a web of financial dependence that is not easy to escape. If this scenario plays out on a large scale, say in a regional crisis in Africa, South Asia, or the Middle East, and nations turn to China instead of the IMF or US for a bailout, the global financial balance of power will shift permanently. At that point, not just economic might, but the entire diplomatic and political order will realign to a new model, where aid is no longer tied to treaties, but to lines of code in a digital wallet. The strategic impact will no longer be about how much money is available, but who controls it and how. If this continues to spread, then next time the world needs a financial lifeline, the hand offering it may no longer be Washington's, but Beijing's. Summary. For decades, the US dollar clearance and the SWIFT system have been the unquestioned backbone of global finance. But today, China, with ECNY and its CPS, cross-border payment system, is gradually building a parallel financial universe where cross-border transactions can occur without dollars and without Washington. The consequence isn't just a bipolar financial system, but a total transformation in how money moves, how power is distributed, and how political influence is exerted. With superior speed, cost efficiency, and control, ECNY is becoming the symbol of a new financial order, where the one who controls the code also decides the future of nations that rely on it. The biggest challenge for the US is no longer a trade war, but a silent race over digital infrastructure and financial technology. And in that race, China is already a step ahead, not through confrontation, but with silent, strategic moves. Final thought, whether it's the digital yuan or the SWIFT system, both are controlled by governments. That's why the world urgently needs a decentralized system capable of standing between the US and China. A third option. This would serve as a contingency solution to the two dominant global money transfer networks today. Pi Network should aim to leverage both the Chinese and US communities to position itself in the middle. So far, we've seen no signs of suppression from either government toward Pi Network, a very positive signal if you're considering joining. Don't miss this new wave. It's a phenomenon we might not witness again for a long time.